seconds. Colburn shoots, deflected, score! The Flyers tie it with 2.8 seconds remaining. Excellent for them. So the Penguins have had leads of 2-0, 3-1. Now Couturier ties it at 5. Sean Couturier with his second goal of the night.
TheFourthPeriod.com presents the O&B Puckcast, episode number 72. As we are back, we're going to have a special show tonight with Jason Myrtetus coming up with us. I guess about 15 minutes or so. I'm your host, Isaiah.
I'm Dan the Flyer fan.
And I'm Chef B.
All right, gents. So we're looking forward to having Jason Myrtetus talk about the emerging goaltending situation in the Metropolitan Division. It's going to be a time of change. We have an emerging scenario where the Flyers and the Penguins even, and all the teams practically, have a young goaltender that could be an all-star, that could be at least a steady, solid starter, and in some locations, like here in Philadelphia, where they haven't had one for a while. Or in other situations like New York, where they have a guaranteed Hall of Famer like Lundqvist stepping out just as someone else may be coming in who it may be comparable. But, gents, let's talk about the injury updates this past Friday from Chuck Fletcher. And it looks like everybody is ready to roll, or will be ready to roll shortly, if by some miracle the season can begin. We'll get to that in just a little bit. Phil Myers has gotten to the point where he'll be ready to play. Nate Thompson would also be cleared if they were ready. JVR is like 1 or 2 weeks away, and that would take up a training camp anyway. And Dan, you'll be happy to hear that Sam Morin has been medically cleared to skate and should be on target to play next year, whenever that is.
Yeah, I was obviously very excited to see the news that Moran, he's fitting the timetable right now, and hopefully there is a season of some kind to get back to in October or November, whenever it picks up, and he'll have a chance to continue to make the roster. Obviously, with Braun and Haig up, they may or not be re-signed, so he may have a chance to make the team this year.
Yep, you never know what's going to happen. We're going through a lot of changes. Of course, Chef, there is one player who has made progress but still is not cleared for contact, and it's the name that's been on the list all year, Nolan Patrick, migraine disorder, status quo.
Yeah, that was the most disappointing thing. You figure that with all the other distractions out there, it kind of like took a back burner. And you were hoping that it was like one of those things where you forgot about something and you come back, that's right, he's okay now. No, it's not. Still no clue. But the good thing about Sam is Dan says he's on schedule. I think he's even a little bit of ahead of schedule, don't you think?
Well, it's more or less, I guess. It's close to the original thing. I believe he tore it in early November. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah, he's probably on pace. Maybe a little beforehand. He's probably he's doing very well.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is, gents, will it matter? Gary Bettman, obviously he's the commissioner of the NHL, has talked about, actually came out yesterday or the day before about what they're trying to do and when they could come back. But they're concerned about everybody's safety and what kind of venue could be safe. I've heard all kinds of plans, like something in the Dakotas, like North Dakota. And then the NHL Players Association has some different ideas. One last thing, Bettman said it would take between 2 and 3 weeks for the players to get back in some kind of playing shape. But Pierre LeBrun from TSN talked about that the players in the NHL are trying to get together, would be willing to delay the start of the 2021 season until November to conclude this season. Next year, they would cancel the All-Star game and the bye weeks and extend the postseason into late June. The league prefers playing some regular season contests before the playoffs and would condense the postseason if necessary. And Dan, to that, Drew Doughty is skeptical that it's even going to happen at all.
Yeah, I can see where he's coming from on this one. I think, there's no rush to cancel the rest of this season. It's only April 14th. I mean, realistically, there would only be, 10, 11 days into the first round of the playoffs if everything were normal. So, they got plenty of time. Basically, they could probably hold off until July if they really wanted to try and squeeze, a compacted playoffs in. So there's no rush to cancel it. But at the same time, I don't know what happens here. There's already 2 organizations, being the Avalanche and Ottawa, that have had players diagnosed. I believe the Canucks had a front office member diagnosed. So until they clear up, and you can do it if they go in their bunkers in South Dakota and, whatever they do there, that's a lot of people. It's 30 teams with, 30 players and a whole bunch of training staff. There's so many people there that, and if one person gets it, then it shuts the whole thing down. So it really just depends on, if a cure comes around, if a medicine comes around, or, an inoculation or something, quick enough to see if they can salvage the year. There's no doubt in my mind they're going to try, but, you look at somebody like the UFC, who Dana White was looking to buy a private island to hold his things on before he was shut down doing that. So, I mean, they're going to try. I believe MLB was talking about doing something in Arizona, being the same kind of concept. So, I don't know. There's no doubt in my mind they're going to try, but whether it actually comes back or not, I'm still leaning on the not going to happen side.
Yeah. And Chef, I've also heard plans where there were one plan where they took just the end of the regular season and they took the highest point percentage and ranked the teams that way. And then there was another plan where they rolled everybody back to 68 games. I heard this in a couple of different sources, but I heard it on Snow the Goalie recently. And that would put the Flyers in first place in playing Carolina. But of course, when is this going to happen? And I, with my background in selling antimicrobials and immunology marketplaces as a farmer rep, which hardly makes me any kind of expert, but at least I get the concepts. I don't see how they can do any of this unless they have antibody tests that shows there's a lot of players and people in the organization that already have antibodies for this virus. Otherwise, the scenario that Dan talked about is one that could occur, and then what do you do?
You definitely don't want a second wave of this. But I don't want to be a negative person like Dan too. I think there's going to be a second wave. I think it's inevitable. It has been with every other pandemic we've ever had. You learn from history, but you sit there and you look at it, and with the condensed season, there's a lot of people out there. I mean, I've had discussions on Twitter with people, and I say this. I say there's going to be a lot of those. For some odd reason, I don't know why, but I pulled up the NHL standings at the close, and you got teams like Detroit, Ottawa, New Jersey, and Buffalo at the bottom, and they're going to want some of their revenue back. There's a lot of these people that are paying their employees for games that would have happened. And they're going to want some regular season games back because they're not in the playoffs. They're not even close to the playoffs. They're out of it. They're completely out of it. And they're going to want some kind of compensation back for their employees, for their people, just so we break it down. Everything's down into micro economies now because everything is so isolated and affected. And if you just start up the season like some people suggested with just playoffs, all these other teams, I mean, some of them are financially hurting to begin with, and to do this to them just could be the nail in the coffin, too.
Yeah, and then there was discussion about the salary cap next year, but then I've heard that blown off. I think it was Pierre Maguire who was saying something on Spectre's Hockey. Lyle Richardson, who runs that site, was talking about, well, that the league is going to have to work something out. It's an unprecedented situation. We have a pandemic at this level, like once every 100 years or something like that, or 50 years, what have you. I've heard of other ones, but I don't recall them. But, I mean, I don't know. I really have no idea how they're going to make this work. I heard somebody today who's an epidemiologist, who they are the experts in using statistics to figure out what's a good time for people to do stuff. And one guy said, we're doing the exact wrong thing. We should have isolated the people that are most affected and then developed what they call a herd immunity. And then the virus has nowhere to go because everywhere it goes, a virus needs a host. So when it can't get that host, then it dies. And what was different about this one, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, is this one was able to survive on surfaces. It's almost kind of like amphibious virus that would, can live in a lot of different environments. And that's kind of what made it so infectious and contagious, what have you. But, because we haven't done that, that's how you get the second wave. It's never as bad as the first one, but it could be enough, like Dan, like you said, to shut everything down.
Yeah, I mean, if it gets, there's things, it goes away in the summer and it'll come back in the fall, and it's just kind of how this stuff happens, and it's going to be a very delicate balance when it comes to relaunching sports, even in empty arenas. All it takes is one player or one coach or one trainer to get it, and all of a sudden, all 30 teams are going to be impacted, and they're going to shut it down, or all cure in some fashion, be it, inoculation or medicine, whatever it is. I just don't see a way that this is going to go smoothly here. But like I said, I think they're going to try at some point. It's a little early. They'll probably try this summer once things hopefully cool down a little bit, but it's going to be a very delicate balance for the immediate future.
Yep. So with that, we are going to turn things over to Jason Myrtetus. Jason was a goaltender, and he's been boning up on all these future stars in the Metro Division, which should make for some great games after we get back to normal, whenever that will be. And we are on with Mr. Jason Myrtetus.
What's going on, boys?
Jason is obviously the pre-intermission and post-game host with the Philadelphia Flyers, and he hosts Flyers Daily and Flyers Fix podcasts, along with the Stick to Hockey pod. Jason, welcome to the O&B Puckcast. I'm Isaiah, and you're on with Chef and Dan.
What's going on, boys? Good to be talking some pucks, man.
Yeah, talking about a whole bunch of other stuff, I'll tell you that.
Oh, yeah, you and me both. I need this game to get back on the ice freaking immediately.
Yeah, we were just talking about a couple things that came out about Gary Bettman and Pierre LeBrun with some of the ideas and stuff you've probably gone through ad nauseum on your fine podcast. I don't know, man. I don't know how they're going to pull this off.
Well, the good news is I think that they seem really amenable to a lot of really drastic, scenarios, which is good. They're willing to go and play playoff hockey in August and September if it gets pushed that far. And that may be with or without fans or at neutral locations, or maybe a couple of locations scattered around North America, like North Dakota, New Hampshire, or maybe something up in, like Regina, Saskatchewan or something like that, and have kind of like some satellites around North America to be able to get this in, because they're trying to save as much money as they can. Because, as you guys know, the players and the owners, they split hockey-related revenue, and they would lose up to $1 billion if nothing gets played again this year. So the trickle down of that is the salary cap's not going to go up. And for it to even stay flat, players would have to escrow an absurd amount of money, maybe upwards of 25% of their paycheck, not knowing how much of that they would get back based on the actual revenues. And, teams and everybody wants to make more money. And it'd be a really sticky situation for a lot of teams because they were planning on a rising cap this year when they signed players and made trades at the deadline. Look at a team like the Rangers. They signed Chris Kreider. They didn't trade him. Right. Now they're going to have to make some hard decisions in other places if, God forbid, that cap goes down. Now, I think the league would also maybe institute some sort of compliance buyout for teams, where you buy a guy out and there's no hit on the cap for it, like they did many, many years ago when the Flyers bought out Ilya Bryzgalov and eventually the last year of Danny Briere's contract.
Right.
You could see something like that. But I don't like get-out-of-jail-free cards. I liked it with Briz because they needed to get that Kukaluk out of here.
Yeah.
But, you know what I mean? But,
yeah.
I don't see a lot of candidates for the Flyers that I go, I really need to buy this guy out right now.
Is there any possibility they could go in the other direction with like a Larry Bird exception for each team? Like one player wouldn't count against the cap?
So your highest paid player wouldn't count?
Yeah.
I doubt it. I think that'd be weird because some teams have their highest paid player, like Connor McDavid, at $13 million. Flyers' highest paid player is Claude Giroux at $8.5 million. So it's not fair, because it's not all equal. Now, if you want to say, okay, we'll just shave $7 million off your cap in total, it's not tied to any specific player, and it's a floating number, I guess you could do that. But I think compliance buyouts, and based on the league doing it prior in their history, would be more likely, in my opinion.
Okay. So,
but the other thing to it with that too, guys, though, is you got to consider, the other thing of this is there's going to be an expansion draft the year after.
Yeah.
So how's that going to affect, who you buy out could affect your ability to protect certain guys. A lot of moving parts.
Yes, yeah. Especially when you consider the fee that Seattle paid, and then you have the new TV contract, which they're really counting on being very lucrative, and you wonder how that could be affected.
Well, and that's precisely the reason why you hear, the Deputy Commissioner Bill Daley and Gary Bettman saying they don't want to do anything that lessens the 2021 season. They want a full 82. They want to head into that TV contract having played a full season in playoff, and they want to go into the year with Seattle in their first year coming off a full year. So all of those things are part of it, and Seattle will be getting involved in that HRR that we talked about, and there'll be an influx of cash there as well because you have another market now, 32 teams. So more, obviously more games, more home games for a team, a whole other stream of revenue, not to mention, the expansion fee, which will be a part of HRR as well.
Sure. So, and I just was thinking about it myself in case people aren't aware, HRR, hockey-related revenue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and the owners and the players, they split that 50-50. It was a big bone of contention in that last CBA, and that's what sets the salary cap.
Right, exactly. So, Jason, you are a goaltender, going a way back, right?
Still doing it like an idiot for some. Well, I haven't done it in a while because I can't get into a frickin' rink. I was walking with my wife over the weekend, and I'm like, my hips feel good. And I'm like, why do they feel so good? Oh, I haven't been on the ice in like 6 weeks. So I'm missing it so much. I went down the other day, and I put a tweet out about this, and I just stuck my head in my goalie bag and took like a bong hit of hockey smell. It was pretty comforting. But yeah, I played the position from the age of 4, so 44 years.
Wow.
So I was 40. I'm 48. So yeah, still doing it like a fool.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're the perfect guy to have on tonight. Because back when the Flyers had a home and home with the Rangers, a local reporter did a column about how Henrik Lundqvist had passed the baton in the division to Carter Hart. And I was thinking to myself, whoa, this goes a lot deeper than that. The Metro is just loaded with young talent. And over the next 7 to 10 years, it's going to totally change everything. And we're going to have new rivalries and everything a lot based on the goaltenders. And I wanted to bring you in and to go over some of these really talented young players going forward.
Yeah, I mean that's the key, guys. Because if you don't have the goalie, then you're in real trouble. Because Brian Burke always says 80% of success in the NHL is based on the goalie. Unless you don't have one, then it's 100%, right? So, you got to have a good goalie if you want to have success. Look, there's a lot of good goalies in the league that aren't on teams that are having success right now. I mean, you look at Carey Price. You can look at a guy like John Gibson, who I think is one of the elite goalies in the league.
Yeah,
that team wasn't slated to make the playoffs in Anaheim, but a goaltender is also the product of his environment. And I think that's the thing that some people don't really understand about the position is you can look at guys and go, man, why are all these guys failing there? If you look at the Islanders a couple of years ago, and they had Thomas Greiss and they had Jarro Alak, and they were 31st in the NHL in stopping the puck. They were the worst team in the league. They were terrible. And then that was with Doug Weight as the coach. Doug Weight got fired, and they brought in Barry Trotz, and they brought in that Barry Trotz system, and the environment changed drastically. And Thomas Greiss, and it wasn't Halak the next year. It was Greiss and
Leonard, Robin Leonard, right?
And Robin Leonard, yes, exactly. Thank you. And all of a sudden, they shaved 102 goals off from year to year. Think about that, guys. More than a goal a game.
I know.
102 goals off, and those two goaltenders are up for the Vezina. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, why is that? Did they just all of a sudden figure out how to stop a puck when the year before they had amnesic and they couldn't remember how to do it? No. They were a product of their environment. And Robin Leonard's a guy that even talked about it this year in playing in Chicago, said that he was actually playing better this year than he did last year for the other year for the Islanders. And the numbers weren't the same, but he had to play better to even keep them in games because the system in Chicago was far more up and down the ice, a lot more odd man rushes, cross the slot line pass attempts and those kind of things, less structured defensively than it was under Barry Trotz and that team on the island.
Right, like what so-called high event hockey.
Yeah, I mean, certain teams, they trade chances. Other teams go, okay, we're just going to lock you down defensively, keep everything to the outside, low percentage shots, limit shot, not only opportunities and volume, but limit, the quality of chance by protecting the house. And, we'll get our chances offensively from good defense. And other teams just go, we're just going to press the hell out of you, and we're going to forecheck the balls off you. And we're going to give up some defensively, but we're going to outscore you. Some teams are built to do that, like Tampa in the regular season 2 years ago. But then they got to the playoffs when that game kind of changes a lot and it becomes like an NBA playoff where it's like half court, and you just couldn't play pond hockey and go up and down the ice. And even Vasilevsky, as great as he is, couldn't sustain that in that series against Columbus, and they got swept in the first round.
Yeah, they just weren't built for the grind. So, and that. That's something they're hoping to change this year.
Well, they did. They changed it this year in a big way. I mean, they don't trade chances like that anymore. Them getting swept in the first round, they learned from it. They played with a lot more structure and more dangerous, I believe, they would be in the playoffs if the NHL does get it in.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's not swim up against the tide. We were talking about the Islanders. I thought the Islanders, just before we get into and talk about their young goalie who might be joining them, I thought that what the Islanders did, reducing their goals, like 102, like you were saying, was kind of like a model for what the Flyers were trying to do when they went into this past offseason. Because a lot of pieces were in place, and Chuck Fletcher talked about mindset and habits, but reducing goals against was really at the top of the list.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a big part of it, and it was, being smart defensively and coming out of the defensive zone with a 5-man unit to really attack and stress an opponent. And, you look at a guy like Alain Vigneault, he really likes to get the puck up ice, and he's got defensemen that can do that. When you have guys that, the veterans that you added with Niskanen and Braun, and really in particular Niskanen, the effect that not only he's had on the team, but on that D core, calming him down, and being that veteran presence that they need. And he's better than I thought he was. I thought maybe he was a little tilted on the back end further than he is at 33 years of age. But he's still got a lot of game left, and he's been really good. And they're a team that can skate. I mean, you look at some of these. Provorov, great skater. Look at Sanheim, great skater. Phil Myers, I mean, ridiculous, right?
Right.
And you look at these guys and you go, That's the NHL today. You got to be able to get the puck up ice. Use your defensemen to do that. Flyers lead the league in defensive scoring, and that's with Gostisbehere having a hugely down year, and down year from a down year. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
He's another tick down from last year. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's 2 consecutive down years. I know he's battled some injuries this year, but does he have the ability to recapture it? We'll see. There are a lot of D guys still on the way, and you still have some depth with Friedman, and you got other guys coming. So Zamula and obviously Cam York as well. So they're really set there on the blue line, and that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to run down some of these teams in no particular order. Let's start with Dan, and I guess was that the New York Islanders? So
you want to start with Sorokin, right?
Yeah.
Who just signed the contract. There was a lot of rumors around at the trade deadline that they were shopping him because they didn't know if they could get him signed. They didn't know where they were going to do it. Only taken 78th overall. He's not the biggest goalie. He's only 6'2", but he's long. When you watch him play, you go, he's got to be bigger than 6'2" because he plays long. He's a real thin guy. He won the goalie of the year in 2016 in the KHL as a 20-year-old. He's won an Olympic gold. But when you watch him, guys, he looks so much like Bobrovsky, his fellow countryman, that it's crazy. You can tell he's heavily influenced by his game, both in the way he moves down low, his edge work, but also his hand positioning, the glove hand in particular, a slightly lower positioning than you see a lot of goalies now. His edge work on his skates is very under control. He's incredibly athletic. His hands in depth are just like Bob's, like I said. There's a couple things that I worry about with him a little bit. He has a tendency to bounce up and down when he's shuffling. That's good to see over screens, in those situations. But it does make sealing the ice a problem. There's some other things, his head was a bit of an issue early on in his tracking of pucks and head trajectory. He's really kind of brought the chin down and really worked on that. And I saw an improvement there in some of the film I looked at and looking at him from last year. He's not, he gets out, he's got good depth. He plays out pretty far. He'll get his heels on the crease. And he's athletic enough to handle that. But I wonder if that's going to be something that's going to be hard for him at the NHL level. That's what I worry about with a guy like him. It's just more, it's more real estate to cover. When Marc-Andre Fleury got out to Vegas, they brought him back into the net a little bit more. So he had to make less crazy saves because he had to travel less of a distance. And I wonder if that's going to be the case with Sorokin, but he's a great athlete. He needs to clean up some of those small aspects, his post-integration, a little over-aggressive at times, but he will be a very good goalie in the NHL.
Yeah, the only thing I would say about him from a total layperson compared to you in terms of goaltenders, he seems to play a lot more in desperation mode than would allow him to be successful in the NHL.
Yeah, I mean, you obviously watch his highlights and stuff, and you see a lot of that. You see a lot of it where he's diving around and all that stuff, and those are self-inflicted wounds. You go, well, why is the goalie doing that? Well, because the original save, he wasn't where he needed to be. So he got himself overplayed a situation, or, he relies on that athleticism at different levels and in the KHL, and he could get away with it. Now, at the NHL level, you're probably not going to get away with that as much, so he's going to have to adjust to playing with the best players in the world.
So did he officially sign yet, or did he just refuse to sign the KHL?
He signed. He's out of his KHL deal, and he signed his entry-level contract with the Isles. So he will be their goalie next year. Yeah.
Well, that's something. Really looking forward to that. Dan?
Do you think Varlamov takes a back seat to Sorokin next year?
Well, you got to see how he adjusts to the North American game. Maybe initially, they kind of put Sorokin in the situation, see how he handles it, see what he can handle, how much he can handle, and kind of, monitor it as you go. The other thing, and I think this helps Sorokin, is that he's got a countryman there already. So that helps him with a lot of the, the language things and getting used to North America. I don't know how much Varlamov's looking to help him. Guys coming over here to take his job. But that being said, it's always good to see a guy, especially for Russians. It's good to have another guy in your system that's, especially a goalie, that can really help you along the way.
Was that strategic on Lou's part, passing on Leonard and thinking a year or two ahead by getting Varlamov because supposedly he had some kind of relationship with Sorokin, or is that a lot of just empty scuttlebutt?
Lou doesn't do anything without a purpose. I worked for him at the Providence College Hockey School years ago. I'm talking in the 80s. That's how old I am. Yeah, everything's calculated. Lou absolutely did it for that exact reason. Absolutely.
Gotcha. Chef?
Mackenzie Blackwood, I mean, you talked about being a product of the environment. I mean, things were pretty rough for him this year in Jersey. I mean, but by all accounts, I mean, he looks like he's going to be solid down the line, right?
You know, you allude to it. The environment there in New Jersey may not look, you know, they're not a good team. But the environment's not as bad as you think. For years, Corey Schneider was able to mask the environment there when it was really poor. And then his game went south. That hip injury kind of sent him to the rail, opened up the door for Kincaid, which eventually opened the door for Mackenzie Blackwood, who, I mean, when he was coming into his draft year, guys, he was the top-ranked North American goaltender in that draft, in the 2015 draft. Big guy, 6'4". A lot of teams were still looking for real big goalies at that point. He's a guy that, since he's gotten to the Devils, has performed well. I mean, when you look at his numbers, he's got a .272 goals against average. He's got a .918 save percentage, .916, excuse me. Those are solid numbers on a team that's not very good. The environment's not as bad as you would think there. But, you know, as a second-round pick, he's a good goalie. I don't think he's going to be a great goalie. It's not the second coming of Brodeur or anything like that. But he's a big guy, and he's interesting to watch because he's a guy that is a bit of a throwback, in my opinion, because he holds his edges a lot more than a lot of the goalies do now, especially the younger guys, where, you know, if a puck's down on a dead angle, which is basically if you draw a line from the post to the boards and have it go along the bottom of the circle to the goal line, that's called a dead angle zone. And then below the goal line, he doesn't get into an RVH, which is, you know, down on his knees and in an RVH position in a lot of those situations. He plays them on his feet. And at that size, he can really, really get into a shooter's head because there's just so much man there that there's not much to look at. He's pretty unflappable. He's not the most, dramatic goaltender, but he uses his size very effectively. So he's a good goalie, but I don't think that he's going to be one of those guys that is going to wow you both in his style of play and the result, unless he gets a really good team in front of him.
Yeah, and that's good for Jersey, especially after the disaster. When Corey Schneider went a whole calendar year without a victory or something like that.
Yeah, and then he got one, and then I think he went another 4 months without another one.
It's like he's on a losing bender. But
yeah, I mean, well, real quick on Blackwood too. I mean, if you look at him, you know, there's the basic, like, for the goalie geeks, we call it the ABCD of goaltending. It's the depth, and, you know, A means aggressive, like way out. Like, remember back in the day, like Richter would be out like at the bottom of the circle, or Grant Fuhr. And then your base depth for a goaltender's like at the crease, you know, heels on the edge of the crease. Conservative depth would be like your heels or your toes like inside the crease line, or kind of just straddling the line. And then a defensive is like Lundqvist, who presses on the goal line. Blackwood's a guy, he plays a real conservative depth. He uses his size so he doesn't have to travel as far. So he uses his frame to really be an asset for him. So I think it's a smart move for him. But he is athletic, and he's got real good. He covers down low tremendously well with those long legs. But I just don't know that if he doesn't have a really good D in front of him, that he can really be a great goaltender.
But he's good enough to make those Saturday afternoon games scary, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And well, look, any goalie that's in the NHL can do that.
Yeah, I was just thinking about
horseshoe it in their ass at some point.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking about those Saturday afternoon games in Jersey, where the Flyers used to always lose. But
oh yeah,
yeah. But
outshoot them and lose. That was the recipe.
Let's go to the top of the division, where we have a Stanley Cup winning goalie in Braden Holtby in his final year of a deal. He's 30. He's looking to get paid. but he happens to have a youngster with a lot of potential, Ilya Samsonov, behind him, and they're paying Phoenix Copley to play in the minors a decent amount of money. Something's got to break in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting situation, and you have obviously Holtby. I think he's going to be gone. They're not going to offer him anything this offseason. He'll walk with a cup, Stanley Cup ring on his finger. Samsonov's really interesting because they took him with the 22nd overall pick. First round goalies, rare for that to happen. He was a top-ranked goalie by Central Scouting in 2015. He won the Gagarin Cup in the KHL. He's won silver and bronze in the World Juniors. He's got the full bag. Great compete level, great athleticism, good angle play. Does cause himself a little bit of issues overplaying opportunities and gets into scramble mode a little bit. When I looked at a lot of his games, so he does go into desperation mode a little too quickly and a little too often. He's going to have to get that under control. Got great size, and he's going to be a guy that if he continues to develop, is going to be able to be a legit number one bell cow goalie, give you 55 to 60 games a year. Going to be a guy that's in the top 5 in save percentage and goals saved above average and those kind of advanced analytics for goaltending. He's big talent, got a huge upside. Yeah, he's going to be a good one.
Yep. So that excellence in goal will continue with the Washington Capitals, even as the rest of that roster may seem to age out. But
well, that's the key, right? Are they able to, as Ovechkin gets up there and Oshie and Backstrom they just signed, are they still going to be a team that is sustainable as a cup contender, or are they going to have a good goalie on a team that's going to have to rebuild? And he's young, obviously, Samsonov. So, and how's that environment going to change if they decide to extend Ovechkin? What kind of money does he get, and can they allocate that defensively? They just signed John Carlson to a huge contract, so there's a lot of questions there about that team. Very much like the Penguins in that regard, that they've had this wide open window for so many years, but eventually, as I always say, guys, the credit card bill comes due, and you can delay it as long as you want, but it's building up interest, and when it comes due, it freaking hurts.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and let's talk about the Penguins, who have Tristan Jarry, who's actually having a better year than Matt Murray, the 2-time Stanley Cup winner. And they also have a very good veteran in Casey DeSmith, who's getting paid a decent amount to play in, what is that, Wilkes-Barre?
Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, yeah.
Yeah. So something's got to give next year, I would think, with the Penguins.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting. Fleury, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You never know. To me, I looking at and I've seen a lot of Matt Murray, and obviously the way he came on to the NHL and just, winning 2 cups, and he was sensational too. When he came back in for Fleury in that playoff in the second cup, it just unbelievable goaltending. He's an RFA after this year. Tristan Jarry's an RFA after this year. Casey DeSmith's got 1 more year under contract. As you said, he's with Wilkes-Barre. But to me, I would probably move forward with Jarry over Murray if I could. How Jim Rutherford decides to handle this situation, does he reward a guy for winning 2 cups? Well, you can't really do that. And Murray's going to command more money. He's coming off a 3.75 cap hit. And Tristan Jarry is coming off $675,000, so huge difference, right, on your next payday. And he's got to consider that because he's a guy that's been delaying that credit card bill for a long time. Yeah. In Rutherford, and they go out and they make that Zucker deal, and they're a team that does that. You look at Jarry, and and watching a lot of the tape on him when I was getting ready for this. God, he's so boring to watch. He really is. He's 6'2". I can't believe that he's 6'2". I think he's like 6 foot because he definitely does not look 6'2". But he gets the job done. He's been solid. He's got, a save percentage this year. It's decent. .921, pretty good. Yeah. Only 33 games, but, hey, I'll take a .921 save percentage in today's NHL, no doubt. 2.43 goals against average. 3 shutouts on the season. Yeah. That's the guy I'd be more comfortable moving forward with because Matt Murray's been injured a ton, too. You look at his year. He's got an .899 save percentage in 38 games, 2.87 goals against average. I don't know that I can rely on him. And I know that he won. It was a big part of winning you 2 cups. You can't say that he won the cups because you had Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and Phil Kessel and, all the other cast of characters there. So Murray was a big part of it, but I'd be more comfortable in Pittsburgh moving forward with Jarry because I don't think the drop-off, if any, is there. If not, it might even be an upgrade, number one. And number two, the money situation's got to be calculated into it. Jarry was a second-round pick, 44th overall in the 2013 draft, and Matt Murray was a third-round pick, 83rd overall in the 2012 draft.
Right. And then both are arbitration eligible, so their hand is going to be forced either way.
Yeah, and how do you? What's those arbitration hearings go like? Oof. One guy's got great numbers, but not the track record. The other guy's got a great track record, but awful numbers in the year that he's coming off of and has been injured a bit. So I don't know. Team doesn't like to take those all the way to the actual arbiter, but one of those could end up there, and depending how they handle it, I think they'll trade one. Is what I think will happen.
Yep.
And Smith will become the backup.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Dan?
Let's talk about the Columbus Blue Jackets. Obviously, Elvis Merzlikins and Matisse Kevliniks, if I'm pronouncing that right. Is Elvis's run, this magical run that he was on this year, is this legit or is it just, kind of a whole lot of smoke and mirrors?
Well, I mean, he was a guy that was really well thought of. When he in his draft year, he was taken back in the 2014 draft in the 3rd round by Columbus, and a Latvian kid, and I'm not sure on Merzlikins. Sometimes I see him and I really like it, and other times I'm just kind of like, whatever, it's nice. And the results were good after his first 9 games. He went 0-9, by the way, in his first 9 starts in the NHL. So people like to conveniently forget that. But he did go on a run. I mean, when they had to go back to him when Korpisalo got hurt, he went 8-2, 948 save percentage, 172 goals against average in that time when that team needed him to carry the mail, and he did. But I wonder, was that a guy just kind of getting that, like I alluded to it, that horseshoe in his ass, where you just get dialed in? I mean, you've seen so many goalies over the years do that, whether it's Andrew Hammond with the Ottawa Senators way back, or Jim Carey way back when with the Washington Capitals. They just have a magical period of time or a season or a run. I think he's better than that, but I just don't know that I buy that he's a legit number one, bona fide, really good top half of the league NHL goalie yet. I don't. I like Korpisalo a little bit more than I like Merzlikins, to be honest with you. But Korpisalo dealt with some injuries this year. So where they go, both goalies are RFAs, restricted free agents this offseason. Could they trade one of them? Sure. Will they trade one of them? I'm not sure. I'm not sure exactly how Columbus is going to handle this situation, but a conundrum wrapped in a riddle right there with their goalie situation.
Is Korpisalo's overall play better than his numbers let on?
I think he's just a higher pedigree goalie, Jonas Korpisalo. So there's a reason why he went into the year as their number one. He sat behind Bob. Merzlikins just kind of burst on the scene and came over from playing in the Swedish Elite League. So I think Korpisalo is the higher pedigree goaltender. That doesn't always mean success at the NHL level, but I would feel more comfortable if I'm a Columbus fan moving forward with Korpisalo, although I think probably most fans, uneducated ones in particular, love the story of Elvis and love the celebrations. He's a character, and they're going to remember that 8-2 run where he was so great, and they're going to prefer that. But I think the more diligent move for Jarmo Kekalainen and that GM and the GM there in Columbus is going to be to go with a guy like Jonas Korpisalo.
Interesting. That'll be another one where you have 2 players that are arbitration eligible RFAs, and someone's going to try to make a move. The one thing Columbus has going for them, they have lots of cap space, at least as things stand right now.
Yeah, because nobody wanted to sign there. Yeah, I mean?
Yeah, well, I was going to
a lot of draft picks and a lot of cap space. Yeah, what good's cap space if you can't get anybody to come play for you? No, but I like Torts, and I really do, and Seth Jones is obviously great. Cam Atkinson's a really good player. They got some real good talent there, but they're gonna have to rebuild it a little bit, and Werenski's a great player.
Dubois.
So they're a team that can. turn it around. Pierre-Luc Dubois is a great player, so they can turn it around pretty quick.
Yeah. I think they still have the structure of a good team. It's just the parts, the puzzle pieces are missing with them, and that'll be intriguing to see how they deal with that. And we talked about them earlier.
Real quick, back to the environment again. Goaltenders playing behind a John Tortorella system. No team blocks more shots than a John Tortorella system.
Right.
You don't block shots, you're on the bench. He'll staple gun your ass to the bench and then super glue it. So that's another thing. His players die to block shots. So that environment is a good one for a goaltender. So that kind of goes into my weighing exactly who these goalies are. I have to consider the environment that they're in, their technical abilities, and then, the things that you can't measure with analytics like character, compete level, repeat the compete, those kind of things.
Right. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Now, we talked earlier about the New York Rangers. Now, they have a
fucked up situation.
Well, I was going to say an embarrassment of riches, but it depends whether the glass is half full or half empty. But they do have a cluster, like you said, of a situation with a Hall of Famer to be in Lundqvist, and then the obvious heir apparent in Igor Shesterkin. But they had this other guy, Alexander Gorgiev. Well, I mean, it's better to have talent than not have talent.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you want depth anywhere, you want it at that position, because now the problem is there's only one cage per game. There's only one crease to occupy. So the embarrassment of riches is great as a safety net, but you can only play one of them at a time. Having depth at defense is better because they all play every game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that being said, they're in a real pickle barrel, and it'll be interesting to see kind of where we started here. If they do bring a compliance buyout in, do the Rangers buy out Lundqvist in his last year? Maybe. Do they trade him in the offseason? Does he now say, you know what, you got two guys here, I'll move on, I'll step aside, I'll go for one more run, I'll try and join a team like, Colorado or something like that, and try and put a cap on this great career I've already had? Or do I really want to stay here in New York and end it and ride the pine as the third goalie? Boy, that's not a really dignified way to end a career for the King, right? And you look at Lundqvist this year, and his numbers aren't great, at 3.16 goals against average and 905 save percentage. But if you look at his advanced numbers, he was good earlier in the season. If you look at his goal saved above average and those kind of numbers,
right,
he was in the top 10 in the league. So it's not like he can't play. But onto your point about Georgiev and Shesterkin, to me, this is really simple. Shesterkin's your guy. That seems painfully obvious.
Yeah.
But the question is do you want to have a tandem with two young goaltenders? Because Georgiev's 24 years old right now. Shesterkin is 24. And sometimes, like, I advocated for the Flyers to bring back Brian Elliott because I wanted a veteran with a really young Carter Hart. Now, he was 20 at the time, right. 21 now. And, people were saying, well, just bring Anthony Stolarz back. That'd be a great tandem. No. You need more experience than that. So I think that, especially with Shesterkin, just coming over and just getting into the NHL this year, I think you want a veteran there with him. Plus, you got a tremendous chip in Georgiev. Now, Georgiev's also an RFA. So how they handle that situation, what's his value as an RFA, he's controllable, which is good. He can be a really solid goalie, Georgiev, but I don't think he's a star. Shesterkin, I think, is a star in the making. He's going to be another one in that line of goaltenders in New York with Richter, with Lundqvist, and he's the next one. And he's got all the ability in the world, not an overly big guy, again, 6'2", but long. Tremendous. 12 games this year, guys. A .932 save percentage. Hello.
Yeah.
How about with Hartford and the Wolfpack? He had a 190 goals against average, .934 save percentage, 3 shutouts. Hello. Welcome to pro hockey in North America. Conservative depth, very under control, great post integration, technical abilities all there. Head, shoulder turns, perfect. No wasted movements in his body. Very polished in that regard. Looks like he doesn't even have to very far to travel because he knows where it's going to be. His play reading ability is off the charts. So, to me, he's a guy that could be an all-star in this league for sure.
So there is no respite for Flyers fans in terms of the Rangers goaltending.
No, I mean, look, you love when the Flyers and the Rangers are good because it means something, right? I don't like when the Flyers and the Devils are good. Like the Devil, they don't even have a city; they're an exit on the turnpike. You know, so you know, it's like who cares? But when you're going up, you know, to Madison Square Garden, the greatest arena in the world, Flyers Rangers, a Sunday at noon as the playoffs are approaching, nothing better than that. You want to play against the best guys in the league, and they're going to have a good team. And you got Kakko, and you got Trouba there now, and Panarin's going to be an MVP candidate, may win the MVP this year. You look at all those guys, and I mean, Mika Zibanejad, holy mother of God, he's tremendous. Kreider, who they signed, that's a team that's going to be good. And the Flyers and Rangers are going to be on a very similar trajectory and ascension in this league. Although the Flyers are ahead of them now, both teams are set up for the next 6 to 8 years in tremendous fashion, both with what they have and what they have coming. And the goaltender position is one that's solidified for both of them with good young goaltenders.
Yeah. I like the Rangers just did what they did with the rebuild. They told the fans, and I think they executed a plan very well so far. Of course, like you said, the Flyers are ahead of them, but I think people underestimated how effective, you know, their plan was, and the implementation so far has been good.
It was flawless, and Jeff Gordon, the way he handled it, got a little criticism at the time when he put that letter out. But he was up front, and fans can always respect ownership and a general manager being transparent, and he was very transparent. But look, let's kind of call it like we see it here too. Let's be fair that, you know, Panarin was dying to play in New York.
Oh, yeah.
And you look at, and Trouba was as well. So that certainly helped. You go, whoa, that's a destination people want to go to. The Flyers used to be that destination. Well, the Flyers still are one of those destinations, but, you know, the allure of the Big Apple, you know, the pandemic set aside, is still there. It's just a fact of the matter. And just like, you know, you'd be ignoring it saying that the Canadian teams aren't at a disadvantage because of the Canadian dollar. They are. You know, when players put in an 8-team no trade clause into a contract, you know what's on it? Every Canadian team, even if they're a Canadian kid, because they don't want to take that hit financially. You know who's never on it? Tampa Bay, Arizona. Right. You know why? No state tax.
No state tax, yeah. Yeah, Dallas Stars are probably never on it, too.
Nope.
Yeah. Chef?
I guess it's time to talk about Carter Hart for the Flyers. The only flaw it seems I can see in his game actually is stick handling. He's got to work on that, but I'm sure as a goaltender you could tell us a lot more.
Yeah, as a goaltender myself who loved playing the puck, I will tell you this right now. At 48 years old, I am a better puck player than he is.
And I believe you.
Yep. Yeah. I scored a goal in Bantam.
Wow.
Because Ron Hextall at that time everybody started shooting the puck, and I figured out how to shoot it. I could whip it. I actually scored the goal though off the glass. I didn't call bank off the side glass. But anyway, yeah, you're right about his puck handling. It leaves a lot to be desired. He's got the skills there to do it well. What he doesn't have though is the confidence right now and the decisiveness. Playing the puck is all about knowing what you're going to do, being able to communicate that both verbally and silently with your defenseman, and making the 10-foot pass. He gets the puck, and I think he thinks he has more time, and he's not decisive. You got to get that puck, boom, get it off your stick. Because in the NHL, they're on top of you in a heartbeat, right?
Yeah.
You got to put yourselves in positions. You know, there's a if a puck comes in on your glove side, gets rimmed around the boards on a dump in, and you go around your post on your glove hand side, stop it behind the net, and then if you just sit right there where you stop it, basically parallel with your left post, then that pressure comes to you really quick, and you don't have a lot of options. But if you get that puck, stop it, and drift towards that far post, your right post when you're looking towards the other end, now all of a sudden you got the net as a shield, you have two options open, and he's got to figure these things out. And it's not something you can really do in a season. It's something that you got to do in an off season. Problem is they might not have an off season, basically. Yeah. But it's something where he's just got to get more decisive. They got to get somebody in there to work with him. I know Kim Dillabaugh talked to him. I just had him on Flyers Daily a week and a half ago, and I've talked to him about this several times. Just about getting him confident and making a 10-foot pass. Your D should never come to you when you get the puck, because what you'll do is you'll clear it right into their ass, right into their shin pads, and it'll end up in front of your net, and you'll give up a bad goal. Your D got to know where to go, and you got to just be able to deliver that 10-foot pass, and you can be a real asset. And look at guys like Ben Bishop. Brodeur was obviously great at it. But like Bishop now is tremendous at it. He saves his D so much wear and tear by going out there and starting breakouts. And if you can do that, it can be a tremendous asset. And you're right. It's the only weak part of his game right now.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
I mean, look, as far as his game goes overall, kind of to give the breakdown like I did the other guys, first and foremost, just the kid, what's between the ears is so impressive for a 21-year-old guys. It's just way beyond his years to be where he is mentally in the game and the way he treats his craft. He is very rigid in his routine, both on game days and not on game days, and in his preparation. Oftentimes on non-game days, he'll be at his apartment in Old City, and he'll be doing something called concentration grids to keep his mind sharp. And he'll throw variables into these concentration grids. He does a 10-by-10 grid in 1 minute and 37 seconds. I don't know if you know what these are, these concentration grids, but it's numbers 10 by 10. It's 1 to 100 in these little blocks. And you have to count to 100. So you go 1, then you got to find 2, then you got to find 3, then you got to find 4, right? And you start to remember where some of them are and going back and forth. And you go through it and you time it. It's to really focus and kind of work out your brain muscle. And he does it faster than anybody. Now he adds variables into it, like putting on his favorite television show or his favorite band to try and distract him so he can make it harder. And he goes to 15 by 15 grids. And he's been working with a performance coach and sports psychologist named John Stevenson since he was 12 years old. So the off-ice preparation is all there. His head is in the right place. He's a good kid, not egotistical, wants to work and do all those things. But then you couple that with the natural ability that he has and the work ethic on the ice, and it's really sensational. I mean, his technical play he's the best technical goalie to come into this league, in my opinion, since Carey Price. He may be a top 3 or 4 technical goalie in the league right now, behind Carey Price, maybe even number 2, with his post integration, his precision in his movements, the lack of there's just no wasted movement. The arms don't get flying out everywhere. You don't see him going into desperation mode very often. Although when he does, he's very effective at it. Because, things are, it's a puck, a vulcanized piece of rubber bouncing around legs and butts and everything else, being shot at over 100 miles an hour. So you're going to have to do that. But a lot of times you see him, the way he makes saves is he takes them in the logo. Well, why is that? Because he's in the right spot and he's squared and he's on his edges and he's reading the play correctly. So he's got all the tools. He's gotten even more of a better prospect at the goalie position since turning pro, which is hard to believe after he came out of Everett with just such insane numbers in his last year there. I mean, a .947 save percentage, 7 shutouts in that season, a 1.6 goals against average. And guys, in the WHL, where they score a ton of goals, it's the best goaltended season in the WHL in its history. And he's tremendous. He's not only going to be a really good goaltender, but he's an elite goaltender. He has the ability and the work ethic and the mindset to be one of the top goaltenders in the league for a very long period of time.
Well, the one thing that you just mentioned it too, I find it the most impressive. Everybody else on this list is, in this Metro is 24-ish, 23. I think, one of them is 23. He's got a 3-year jump on all them too. And I think that's a testament to his work ethic.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing. You're right. He doesn't have as many miles on the odometer already, yet he has played in huge situations already. The only other one under 24 is Mackenzie Blackwood at 23. And then, obviously, Maurice Wickens is 26. Corpusalo is 25. Jarry's 24. Murray, 25. You look at all these guys, and you're right. To be where he is at this age, it's just incredibly rare, guys. To be that physically mature, that mentally mature, and emotionally mature at that age, when he's had a spotlight on him like he has for so long. I mean, he's played for his country in Canada in World Juniors and, under 18s and, U17s all along. I mean, he's been a high-profile guy for a long period of time. And, when you play in a World Junior in Canada, that's not just like kids hockey up there. That's a huge deal wearing that Maple Leaf on the sweater. So he's been under high-profile situations and high-pressure situations already and has passed the test with great results. So, he's got all the intangibles. He's got the tangibles and the intangibles. It's all there. And I expect him, to be a guy that wins a couple of Vezinas. I expect him to be a guy that's going to carry you when your team can't give you what they need to give you, and he'll bail you out of games like he did against the Sabres. Not long before the pause. I think the third game before the pause when I think they got shot 39 to 17 in that game.
Yeah,
they won 5-1. I mean, he's going to steal you games when you need it. He's going to be solid, and what he also does, guys, is this. I've talked to so many players on the team about this because it's so when you make a mistake in hockey and it ends up in the back of your net, you play the game paralyzed mentally. And hockey players, and to drive offense, you have to be creative and you have to be a little risky at times. And you lose your ability to be creative and risk when every time you make a mistake or you turn a puck over, you're pulling it out of the back of your net. But when you got a guy back there that is going to bail you out if you screw up, you play the game a lot more free offensively, both for the forwards and the defensemen to jump into plays. And that's one of the big differences in this Flyers team this year as opposed to last year, is that they're able to do that. That's why their defense leads the league in scoring, because they're not afraid to jump into the play, because they got a guy back there in any situation can bail them out.
Yeah, that's a big deal. And and the whole thing with him on the road, that was a quirky thing, and I think he was already going about the business of reversing that. He's played some pretty good games on the road, particularly after January 1st.
Yeah, I mean, look, that got away from him and really tilted his numbers early in the season from that start in Edmonton early on when they were on that the Alberta Clipper trip. That really, he got pulled in that game. Then he had a couple more where he got pulled on the road, and some really lopsided numbers that really kind of put a big ding in his road record for the season. And when you look at his road record and his road numbers, of course, they're not nearly as gaudy as his home numbers. I mean, his home numbers are absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, he definitely was turning that around. They were also shielding him a little bit, in back-to-backs. The road game was generally Brian Elliott was going to get it, right?
Right.
So, I mean, that's just the way it was, and that's the way that Alain Vigneault was doing it. He was trying to get his team into a position where, to get home ice in the playoffs, because you notice how good they are on their home ice in the playoffs, and they were effective at doing that, being a number 2 seed right now in the Metro. So, I think it's a situation where that got maybe, rightfully so, blown a little bit out of proportion right away because of exactly, what happened early on in the season. But I don't think it's something, in his rookie year, he was better on the road than he was at home. So
right.
It's an anomaly.
Yeah, it seemed that way, but it was outstanding. I know, Dan, that you were saying he was like the greatest Vezina winner. He was Dominik Hasek at home, and he was take your pick away, but
Well, yeah, it's like Lindy Ruff. It was Lindy at home and Ruff on the road.
Right.
That's a shitty joke, but I always go to
it. Is Brian Elliott the ideal candidate to come back for one more year after this one?
I believe so. I really do. Since he really properly rehabbed from that injury, that core double surgery that he had a couple of years ago, he looks like a different goalie, doesn't he? I mean, you watch him, you watch the way he moves, and he's, being a backup goaltender is really hard for a guy that was a starter like Elliott for a lot of reasons. Number one, Elliott's a guy that had a lot of success in this league, went to a Western Conference final with the Blues, had a lot of success and won a lot of games, carried the team for a lot of years. And to all of a sudden have to be able to perform when you're not playing games as much is a tough thing to do. I look at a guy like Curtis McElhinney last year. in Carolina.
Yeah.
There was a point where he was playing one game per every 21 calendar days, but he had great numbers. You go, how the hell can you do that? That's tough to do. Some guys aren't built to do it and can't do it. Some guys can. And McElhinney was one. Brian Elliott has shown that he's that guy as well. He's good on the road. He's unflappable on the road. He's been a great teammate for Carter to kind of bounce ideas off of, and to have that older sage veteran guy with a young goaltender, I think is a great mix. So I think it's a win-win all around. And I talked to Moose in training camp, and watching him in a couple of the first preseason games, I went to him, standing in the hall. I just said, dude, like, what's going on? And I asked him, first of all, how did it end up that you were coming back? It didn't look like you were going to. It looked like they were going Talbot. And he said, well, Talbot's wanted to go and try and find a starting gig somewhere, and came together really quick. And I was happy to come back. And I love the organization, love the city, love working with Kim Dillabaugh and working with Carter. And the other thing, I said, dude, your movement looks great. And he said once he broke down all that scar tissue, everything got fluid again in his body. And for a goalie, when you're experiencing pain or discomfort in your core, it affects everything: your arms, your legs, your ability to get wide. And nobody gets wider than Moose down low with his legs and the way he addresses the puck. So once that was fixed and he was able to train for a season and not rehab, it made a huge difference in his ability to do his job. And he does his job, and it's not an easy one.
No, it's not. The one thing I got to give him credit, he doesn't have the greatest numbers, but situationally, in terms of making clutch saves or coming up big in a game when maybe the Flyers aren't playing well, what have you. And every one of those situations where you as a fan are watching and saying, well, we really need a save here, or he gives up a bad goal, and then he's solid. And that's all you can ask from a backup.
Well, how about it, guys? I mean, Carter Hart had that lower core injury and was out for a while, and Moose had to play 8 straight games.
Yep.
Well, actually, he played 8 of 9 because Alex Lyon got that win over Colorado on that Saturday night. But Elliot, what did he do in those 8 games? He went 7-1.
Yep.
I think he had a .933 save percentage and like a 2.1 goals against average in that period of time. And you're right. You can look at numbers, and sometimes they tell a story, and sometimes they don't. Look at Hart's numbers overall this season. They're not spectacular. He's got a .914 save percentage, 2.42 goals against average. The road numbers, an .857 save percentage, have hurt him in his overall numbers. Elliott's numbers got an .899 save percentage. That would probably rank about 45th in the NHL, right? And a .287 goals against average. But he's got a record of 16-7-4. And the last time I checked, the only thing that really matters is W's and L's.
Yeah.
And as long as they plug in that scoreboard, who wins and who loses matters. And he gives you honest performances. And you're right. A lot of times he's in a disadvantageous position because he's playing the second of a back-to-back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And to still have a record of 16-7-4 is really impressive to me.
Yeah. And, of course, that means he's not getting the best Flyers team or the one that played that night before. There's just no way it's going to happen.
Yeah, and most often also it's on the road.
Right.
I mean, you look at his last 7 of his last 8 games, all on the road. All on the road.
Washington.
Yeah, he got the win in Washington 5-2. He got the win in that Columbus game where they won in overtime, where they beat him twice in 1 week. He won in Washington twice. He was in Washington for the 7-2 win as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Checking the old notes there, yeah. Well, what a fun game that was. That might have been the most fun game of the year, but that's
the 7-2.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's when they arrived.
Well, I mean, when they beat Columbus in overtime with that Hayes goal, to me, was that on a back-to-back or something? I forget, but
it was a home and home with
right.
Columbus.
And that, to me, that was just tremendous. They had so much trouble with that team, and you knew how desperate the Blue Jackets were, and the Flyers were just really resilient, played a solid road game, and there were a lot of
I mean, they played Columbus that Tuesday night at home, and they shicked them, right, 5-1, and then they went out to Columbus and they persevered. They came back in the game, if you recall. They were down 3-1. I think Pitlick had a huge goal to make it 3-2. Konechny ended up with the game winner in that game. And they ended up winning the game 4-3. That's what that first Columbus game is what started the 9-game win streak.
Right. Yeah, so it's a damn shame that here we are. As much as I love talking to you about with this incredible division and how it's going to stack up in the future, boy, I wish we had hockey. I guess that's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I'm missing it big time. I'm missing all the sports, and I may even, if baseball was on, I may even consider watching that at this point. But yeah, it's a little shot at baseball there. But I think that they're gonna get a culmination to the season in. I think it's gonna happen. I think the league has made it really clear that they're gonna stretch it as long as they can to try and get a playoff in, whether that's a 24-team field with some play-in situations after a 2 to 3 week training camp, or a regular 16 teams and they go off win percentage or point percentage, and the first 2 rounds are 5 games. I mean, think about it. You could have the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs going on in August and September, while the baseball season's winding down toward their playoff, and in a shortened season where every game's going to mean even more, and the NFL kicking off all at the same time. So while this blows now, it could be epic come August and September.
yeah, that would really be something. And the referees will be wearing gloves like the boxing referees, right? So.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is, then you'll have the off season, which will be the month of October, you'll be cramming a draft and free agency in there, and then the boys will be back in camp to start the regular season November 1st, and they're going to run until late June. I'll take that.
At this point, yeah definitely.
It's what we deserve after this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Chef or Dan, any final thoughts or questions for Jason tonight?
Well, Dan had made the point that, we're not too far gone already. I mean, we're only in, what would be, the second week of playoffs right now? Second, maybe third week. So, I mean, technically, you could kind of, like Dan said, hold out to, July almost and still salvage something.
Yeah, the NHL has said, and I saw this today, that they have not set any kind of drop dead date at this point where they go, okay, we just can't do it. It's too late now. Whether, I don't know if that would be July or if that's August. I mean, they've said that they're willing to play the Stanley Cup playoffs in August and September. They can't go beyond that because they don't want to lessen the 82-game schedule next year. Now, they'll get rid of the bye week and they'll get rid of the All-Star game in a heartbeat to get the 82 in next year. So I think their drop dead date to start would be August 5th, something like that. And then you get the playoffs in, run it August and September, have that month turn over the league year and do all the, off-season business. And then, boom, start another 82 and crank it up to the Cup, and they would give out the Cup late in June that year.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. So it's plausible. We just got to go ahead and find a pathway to make it as safe as possible.
Yeah, I mean, that's the key. It may be taking place on neutral sites, all over North America. I mean, I've been having this debate with some people on Twitter that, well, if they can't have a parade, I don't even want it to happen. Just wait till next year. To me, that's really short-sighted. The parade's a big part of it. I get it. But that's not the culmination of winning the Cup. The culmination of winning the Cup is seeing your team, your captain, lift the Cup when Gary Bettman hands it to him.
Yeah.
The parade's an after party.
Yeah, I went. I'm old enough that I went to the parade in '75. Now that was a great moment, but I'll never forget Bernie and Bobby Clark marching around the ice with that cup in Buffalo. Well, of course, I was 14 when they won it the first time, but I mean that's the moment you remember.
Oh yeah. I mean that they don't. When they show the years later, remembering the Cup win, they don't show the parade. They show the final seconds and Gene Hart counting it down. The Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup, and then them hoisting the cup.
That's it.
Parade's great. I get it, and I get the thing about the parade, but I'm not sacrificing a chance at the Cup just because I can't go out and get shit faced with my buddies on Broad Street.
Yeah.
I could do that tonight.
Do that any day.
Yeah. And look, and who said you had to hold the parade then? You just delay the parade until it's feasible.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Everybody's looking for another Jason Kelsey moment, I guess. But I'll take the cup. That's
what Flyers can deliver that? Kevin Hayes?
Yeah.
I was just going to say Kevin Hayes.
Yeah, there you go. But Jason, man, you've been taking so much of your time. I really appreciate you. Thanks so much for doing this, man.
Oh, anytime, boys. You know that. I'm just dying, to talk about hockey again and sports, and just it's like a huge void. And look, and we obviously, it goes without saying that we hope everybody's staying safe, and that everybody's healthy in your life, and you're doing the right things and staying at home and all that. And sports are very not real world when you consider what's going on in our entire world right now. But I can't wait to get it back on the ice. I miss it dearly, and soon enough we'll all be back at the barn, and people will be drinking beers in the parking lot and hugging fans and high-fiving after you score a power play goal, and it'll be back to normal eventually.
Yep. We'll get there. We'll get there. So, Jason, as if people need to be told, where can people find you on Twitter, and what are some of the shows that people can listen to your expertise?
I'm on Twitter at Jason Myrt. My one podcast is at Stick to Hockey Pod. And I will have actually tomorrow a great episode with Keith Jones and Craig Berube together. Now, Berube protected Jonesy because Jonesy could never stop running his mouth. Still hasn't, as a matter of fact. So there'll be some great stories from Chief and Jonesy on that episode, and it'll be videoed as well. So you can check out the Stick to Hockey Podcast YouTube page for all those. We had Bush on last week. He was breaking out masks. It was great. So you can check me out there. Also, my work for the Flyers, Flyers Daily podcast, and Flyers Fix. We had Chuck Fletcher on the Fix a week and a half ago, and players have been on the Flyers Daily every episode. Sean Couturier, as a matter of fact, will be on tomorrow's episode.
Yeah, I mean, we've been reading about some things, but there's really nothing like hearing the player himself, so you got to check that out.
Yeah, a lot of the guys have been doing conference calls, and you read what they said, but you get to hear it right from the mouth. And we always talk about Tiger King and other crap like that too. So,
all right, man. I definitely want to have you back on when things get cranking again, because I know everybody will be real excited. It's like I said, man. It's really been great. I really appreciate it.
No problem, guys. Anytime.
All right, you take care, man.
Take it easy, guys.
All right. Yeah, that was great to talk to Jason about this division. It's going to be a great division. There's a lot of talent here. One thing I forgot to ask him, and I think I knew the answer. If Carter Hart has a rival, to me, and Dan, you could weigh in, I think Igor Shesterkin from the Rangers sounds like the guy he's most high on besides Carter Hart.
Yeah, it'll be fun to have some of those old-fashioned battles, whether it be, the Islanders or Rangers or Devils, whoever it is. I think he was touching upon that a little bit with the Devils being a exit on the turnpike kind of thing. And I think it'll be interesting to have those kind of battles again, take us back to, some old school hockey there.
Yeah, no question. Hey, Dan, I didn't tell you about this before, but someone in your podcast family suffered a loss as a result of what we're going through right now. And Bobby Thomas lost his father to COVID-19. I just want to, reach out and say, we're thinking about you. Hang in there, brother. It's a tough time in your life. I remember when I lost my father, and this is a totally different circumstance, but just wanted to give him a shout out and let him know that the O&B people and yourself are thinking about him.
Yeah, obviously our condolences with Bobby and the passing of his father.
Yeah. Not to end on a somber note, we're going to be coming back at you in a couple weeks, depending on what the news flow is all about. And Dan, when is your next podcast?
Sometime this week. Maybe early next week. At this point, we are going to have Carson Turinsky of the Lehigh Valley Phantoms on, Flyers prospect, so be sure to check that out. The Best of the Angry Negative Show Season 2 up now on both the Brotherly Pod and Angry Negative Show platforms. And we did an interview on Jim's show with a band member from the band Fit for an Autopsy. So that'll be up, I believe, tomorrow morning as well. So you can check all those shows out, whether they're up now or it'll be out in the next couple days.
Yeah, fantastic. Chef, what do you got to tell the people where they can contact you and where you're at?
You can get a hold of me at Chef to the Left B at Twitter, and of course we're still killing it at Steam Pub, where we can come. You can order online food, and you can pick it up outside with no contact in our hot boxes. All this can be done online, and thank you for your support. I mean, you're keeping us busy. You're keeping everybody fed, which is great. Thank you.
Yeah, Steam Pub in Southampton. Is that steampub.com?
Yes, it is.
All right, that's terrific. So until next time, everybody, stay safe and take care.